سلامي.
هاي عبد الله، كيفك؟
I'm good. كيفك أنت اليوم؟ تمام؟
الحمد لله تمام.
Hello everyone. I'm Ghada Majid, the Alumni Relations Outreach and Engagement Executive. Today's webinar is about coping with loss and grief during prolonged crisis, presented by Dr. Wael Salame. This session is the second in a series of 3 webinars on mental well-being in times of crisis. For those of you who were not with us in the first session, let me introduce to you Dr. Wael Salame, a clinical assistant professor in the Division of Psychiatry at LAU, where he also serves as the Interprofessional Education Program Coordinator and Associate Director of the Clinical Simulation Center. Dr. Salame specializes in internal medicine and psychiatry with particular interest in borderline personality disorder, adolescent psychiatry, impulse control disorders, and interventional psychiatry. He is also passionate about advancing simulation-based medical education. Dr. Salame earned his BS in biology and a teaching diploma from the American University of Beirut in 2008, followed by his MD and clinical simulation diploma from the LAU Gilbert and Rosemary Shahouri School of Medicine. He completed his psychiatry residency there in 2018. Dr. Salame is an active international member of both the European Psychiatric Association and the European Council of Neuropsychopharmacology. Dr. Salame, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ghada. So again, welcome everybody. As Ghada mentioned, this is the second session in a series of 3. Today, the focus will be mainly on coping with loss and grief during prolonged crises. And I think it's important to start, first of all, by defining what a loss is. Because a lot of times when people come across the title, they think that a loss only necessarily has to refer to having lost an individual. But in situations like this and in crises like these, losses can be in terms of lives, but they can also be in of households, it can be in terms of jobs, it can be in terms of sources of income. We know today a lot of companies are downsizing, other companies are having to cut wages in part. A lot of people have lost, unfortunately, their houses. So it's important to know that when we talk about loss, loss is not just in terms of individual losses. And there is no doubt, Akid, that losing a loved one or losing a family member, a friend, a distant relative does take precedence over other losses, but it's also important to not minimize and not undermine other losses, because everybody can potentially be a victim of a loss or difficulty grieving today. So I think it was important to first start by highlighting the importance of what a loss can be. I think it's important today to also understand that it's human nature to feel frustrated, to feel distressed, to feel that you're having difficulty coping with certain triggers or certain stressors when you do feel like you've suffered a loss. And when we look across individuals, a lot of studies today are coming up, but I think what's more important than studies is actually talking to people. So that's what I did. I asked some people across the hospital, in the university, in Biblos campus, and surprisingly, the number 1 loss that people have expressed is the loss of control. And this was even in people that have lost relatives, that have lost their houses, people that have had to suffer having lost even more than 1 family member. But in addition to those losses, they tell you what bothers me the most today is the loss of certainty, the loss of being in control of what to do. Everybody has everything on standby. People are not able to function in a very normal way because of the uncertainty that prevails today. So I think, as I was saying, it's important to acknowledge that yes, control or having thereof the loss of it is indeed a loss that we need to acknowledge, because this is something that's very frustrating in terms of human nature. We all like to be in control. We all like to know how things are going to be. We would love to have our lives planned out from A to Z. So obviously today that's not possible. If we're going to focus a bit more on loss and grief in terms of having lost family members, having lost friends, having lost relatives. Again, here, we need to break it into two categories. We have those individuals that have been lost because they've been displaced or they've had to relocate. A lot of people today have taken the decision to leave Lebanon and go live abroad with their families, or they've decided to start a life abroad because the situation in Lebanon is unstable. There's no guarantee how things are going to progress. So for people that are still in Lebanon, that is considered having lost a son that now lives abroad, having lost a husband that now is working abroad, having lost a mother or a father or a parent or a sibling. So these are losses. And then Akid, we have losses in terms of individuals that have lost their lives. And we do know that numbers are still on the rise. A lot of people have today experienced losses more than before, because up till maybe around 2 weeks ago, people were able to foresee where there was a high risk area. And so all of the high risk areas, be it the Beirut suburbs of Dahiya Jnubiya or most of the southern areas of Lebanon, those areas had already been displaced. People relocated. So the chances of somebody being injured in those areas had significantly decreased because people already knew that those were hot areas or target areas. And so a lot of people had to relocate. And as we saw over the last 5 days, the 3 explosions that took place in Beirut, again, targeted areas that were very populated. Baseline, these are areas that are very populated, very crowded. They are residential areas. And with the displacement of individuals into those areas, now they've become even more crowded. So now people, again, are no longer sure of where a safe area is. Individuals have lost their lives in the last 3 explosions that happened in Beirut, in addition to all of the explosions that have happened in the Beirut suburbs. And so there's always the constant fear and worry about how to deal with grief. And it's a bit paradoxical because today the main challenge is, I'm going to tie a bit into another subject, because earlier today in the afternoon we had through the School of Medicine, we had another talk which focused more on positive thinking in terms of the current situation. And it's very difficult today for people to think positively or to live their lives positively in light of the losses of some people without feeling guilty. And that comes from, the topic was raised today out of one person that asked, we're approaching Christmas, and Christmas is supposed to be a time of joy and celebration. And so me and my husband are caught in the dilemma right now. Do we put up a Christmas tree for the children or do we not? Is it appropriate to celebrate, or is it inappropriate and disrespectful to celebrate? Whether we've lost somebody or we haven't. And so that's where the topic came up about positivity and the importance of hanging on to positive emotions like happiness. And so linking it today to coping with grief and coping with losses, a lot of people today are caught in the dilemma of how to move forward. Is it something natural for people that have lost individuals that they go to work, they continue to function? They're thinking about what kind of gifts to get for their kids in the holidays. They're maybe trying to think about possible plans related to taking a vacation, whether in winter or maybe in spring. So there's this dilemma of, should I feel that I'm doing something wrong if I've lost somebody? Should I feel like I'm acting inhumanely or inappropriately if I'm experiencing positive emotions in certain times, or I'm allowing myself to enjoy certain things in certain times? Or is it okay for me to experience those things? And I think here the most basic answer would be that the biggest misconception that human has is the ability to control emotions. Emotions and thoughts are the 2 things that we cannot control. We can have a positive thought and control how we act on it. We can have a negative thought and control how we respond to it. But you cannot actually control whether you have a positive thought or whether you have or experience a negative thought. And it's the exact same thing when it comes to emotions. You cannot feel guilty because you experienced happiness in light of the current situation. Because it's one thing to experience happiness intentionally while other people are suffering, that you should feel guilty for. But in reality, most of the time, we can't even do that. Even if we would like to pretend that we can be happy, most of the time people would look like they're happy and they're functioning completely normally, but on the inside, they're not. So when you do actually get the opportunity to experience happiness, you should grab onto it. You should be able to enjoy those times. That's not disrespecting lost individuals. That's not disrespecting a person that you should be grieving. On the contrary, it's the exact same concept related to grief in any situation, outside of the context of war, related to the COVID pandemic, related to individuals that lose their lives to car accidents or to cancer or to any other medical condition. We always say that life has to go on whether we want it to or not. And you continuing, despite having lost somebody or knowing somebody that has lost somebody, is part of human nature. It's part of the sustainability of our community. So I think it's very important. The first idea or the first thing that we need to understand in dealing or coping with grief and loss is that we need to accept and acknowledge that it's okay, despite our losses, to enjoy happiness sometimes. And this is not a form of denial. Denial is completely pretending nothing happened. But acknowledging a loss and then from time to time enjoying something or trying to plan a nice activity because there's a specific occasion, that is okay. And bilaks, that's something that can have positive outcomes on you, which allows you to sustain work productivity. It allows you to give more back to your community and even be more positive in helping those in need today. So, as we said, it's important to acknowledge our right to happiness. It's important to acknowledge our right to experiencing positive emotions despite experiencing losses or grief. And again, like the title says, this is prolonged crisis. It's exactly like what happened during the COVID pandemic. Usually when you have short-lived crises, like anticipating a death of an ill patient or a sudden car accident or an earthquake or a natural disaster, usually it's much more shocking for an individual when we cannot anticipate negative things because we're not prepared. But the aftermath of the actual event is usually much shorter in terms of duration. So we're able to overcome it at a quicker pace. But the way things are happening at the moment, because of the prolonged crisis, people again are not able to actually acknowledge what is happening. Even people that have lost loved ones, they haven't had the opportunity to grieve that person. Because when somebody lost a loved one at a place that was bombed, they don't stay there. They have to automatically pick up and try to relocate somewhere else. And then once they find a location, they need to again try to find a supermarket close by to stock up on materials. We're coming now into winter, so people that maybe didn't have winter clothing or blankets, they're having to get all of these things to plan forward. And so where's the grief of the lost individual in this situation? So even in a prolonged state of crisis like the one that we're living today, sadly, individuals aren't actually able to grieve their losses. So I think this is very important. Again, the second take-home message is that we need to allow ourselves to actually grieve what we've lost. And again, not to minimize or downsize the loss of anybody, but a person that has lost their home has the exact right to grieve and be sad and be frustrated and be angry as somebody that has lost a loved one. One loss definitely is more important at a human point of view, and akid that is losing a loved one. But losing everything you've worked for your entire life, all of the work and your revenue that you've placed in one place, having lost it, also justifies feeling extremely frustrated and like you're actually grieving. And I actually had one patient that came and said, I feel very uncomfortable and embarrassed saying this, but I've worked for 55 years, and you know the situation today in the government. So my income today is less than $200 a month because our salaries haven't been fixed. And I lost my house, which was all my life savings. And so now I have two kids, one in university and one in school, which I don't even know how I'm going to plan on continuing their education, because their plan was to actually sell the house, get something smaller to be able to pay for for his kids' tuition. So has this person lost? Yes, they have. They maybe haven't lost an actual life, but from his point of view, he's the reason that his kids may potentially lose their future career paths. So it does warrant feeling grief over a house. People shouldn't take this as somebody that is superficial. We shouldn't assume انه هيدا همه بالبيت او هيدا همه بالمصاري اللي راحت, because this is the guarantee for tomorrow's sustainability to some people. We're saying the biggest concern and the biggest loss that any human can have is losing control over uncertainty. So that in itself means that that person has significantly lost something as well. And like I said, if anybody has any questions or anything that they would like us to address, I would be more than happy, Akid, to take any questions. Today's talk is definitely shorter than last time's, but I think irrespective of the length of the talk, it's important that we discuss these subjects. So Anna, here I open the floor, Akid, if anybody would like to raise anything. But again, very briefly, loss and grief are, to grieve over what we've lost is a very normal human reaction. It's not a sign of weakness. It's not a sign of not knowing how to deal if a person mourns over the loss of a loved one. Everybody has a right to grieve, whether it's losing an individual, losing life investments in a house, losing a piece of land. A lot of people today don't understand the actual value of land to people in the South, because most individuals living in Beirut and cities today live more of a commercial life. They live more of a life that is dependent on exchange, on financial relationships, on buying and purchasing and withdrawing and stocking up. Whereas people living in the South, land has a very, very, very significant meaning to them, almost equal to the meaning of their existence. And so today, when a person tells you that I've lost everything I have, and then when you ask them what it is, they tell you it's a piece of land, it's sad to see that sometimes people laugh at that response. But in reality, to that person, that is all he has. That is his identity. That is his life savings. That is his father, because they believe that that land is what allows them to exist today. So they have the right to mourn and grieve over those kinds of losses as well. So with that, Anna, I will conclude. I open the floor, Akid, if anybody has any questions. Ghada, if you have anything you would like to ask, or if anybody in the audience has any questions, then Akid, we can tackle those.
Thank you, Dr. Salame. We open the floor for anybody who likes to ask.
Ghada, Anna, I have a question. It's Gabi here.
Yes, تفضل Gabi.
Yeah, thank you for the talk. It's very informative, Dr. Salame. I was wondering, we used to hear with regards to loss and grief, that sometimes people need something new, something else to cling to, like the replacement theory type of approach. Is that at all something that we look at in these types of, obviously, tragedies? Are there anything close to that in this case?
Yes. Yes. So Gabi, thank you very much for that question. This is a very good topic. Indeed, when we talk about loss, any kind of grief, we always talk having to replace a loss with another purpose, because again, when we talk about human nature, humans can only sustain life when we have an objective. And so that's why we always say it's always important to have an ambition. But when we talk about an ambition, again, it needs to be in perspective that individual ambitions may differ from one person to the other. Not everybody's ambition is to be a CEO or to be a high positioned individual in politics or to be a physician. Some people's ambition is to open a restaurant. Other people is to excel in cooking. Other individuals are to excel at art. Other people's ambition might be something like visiting at least 80 different countries before I die. These are all goals that allow individuals to have a purpose to wake up tomorrow. And so going back to what you were saying and linking it to replacement theory, it is very important that we acknowledge the loss of an individual, but again, reinforce and highlight the importance of trying to identify something else that they need to look forward to. So for example, when a person has lost a loved one or lost a family member, the focus and attention on that family member, we need to try and work on redirecting it onto somebody else. And so for example, if a mother or father has lost their son as a result of the explosions that took place, but that son's children, the grandparents, grandchildren are still around, then usually we try to focus on having their ambitions and their goals and their primary focus on their child redirected towards the grandchildren. Because through those grandchildren, they see the image of the person they lost. They're able to relive certain aspects or experiences that they had during childhood with those grandchildren today. So we always try to reshuffle and reorganize whatever we have that is still there today to try and provide a replacement for what's lost. So yes, replacement theory does apply in situations like today, whether it's, again, losing a loved one, losing a household, anything that we've lost. It's always important to try and encourage redirecting what we've lost into other areas. This is something that will definitely help in terms of coping mechanisms. Another important idea just to keep in mind is what we call bereavement. Bereavement هي الفترة الطبيعية النورم الحداد. And so from a psychiatric point of view, a lot of people at a personal level find that it is it's very inappropriate to put a timeline on how long we should grieve an individual. And it's not the same if you lose your life partner versus if you've lost a parent that's 95 years old, and whether you've lost a child that's in their teens, or whether you've lost a sibling that you're very close to or a sibling that you're very distant from. And I agree, to some extent, you cannot unify the experience or put them all at the same level. That's in general, when we talk about mourning, mourning is normally acknowledged as a normal process when it lasts up to 90 days or 3 months. Beyond 3 months, this is when we need to start looking at if things are still functionally normal or not. That doesn't mean that in the 4th, 5th month, a person has completely forgotten who they've lost and life has gone on. We do expect that after 3 months of grieving, a person has actually acknowledged what they've lost. They've been able to psychologically process how this impacts their life. And they've gone one step beyond the psychological processing, which is the actual practical processing. So it's one thing to say إنه واحدة خسرت جوزها أو واحد خسر مرته، أنا كان جوزي يعمل كل شيء ولا بعرف أتصرف بحسابات ولا بحياتي عملت معاملة ولا بس okay, at the end of بآخر المطاف, you need to do those things. That person is gone. Now you need to take responsibility of daily activities. Now you need to take responsibility of financing, of carrying out major tasks, of making sure tuitions are paid, of making sure that governmental or legislative materials are being processed. So we need 3 months to absorb the trauma, 3 months to acknowledge the psychological impact the person had on us and the void that was created today, and to replace it. And also what we need to do in terms of practicality to make sure that we are ready for what is to come. But again, it's normal for a lot of people to take more than 3 months. Some people go up to 6 months or to a year to be able to regain life completely normally. Thus, they should be at a functional level at the end of 3 months.
Salame, thank you very much. I have a question, but
Yes, Abdullah.
before I ask my question, I would like to thank you on behalf of everyone who's attending here. Another fantastic topic and another fantastic speaker. عن جد وائل Yani we're learning a lot, and you're comforting us a lot. I want to ask you about the loss of stability and the uncertainty. What is your advice to people who are going through uncertainty, which is everybody here, I believe? Should we look at a plan B? Should we just sit back and wait and let our destiny, up to whoever? And everybody today is waiting for the politicians to come up with a ceasefire or whatever. So everybody's waiting for someone to take a decision on their behalf. What can we do, to take the lead on our own decisions and on our destiny?
So Abdullah, I'm going to answer this from two perspectives. The first, the psychological and spiritual, and the second, the practical. The psychological spiritual is that in reality, life altogether is uncertain. That's the biggest misconception that human has, that we are in control. What are we in control of? Of time? We cannot control time. Are we in control of if we're going to wake up tomorrow? We're not. Are we in control of whether we're going to get sick or live a healthy life? We're not. Are we in control of the economy? We're not. So in reality, we were born without control. We convinced ourselves, and this is what we call, sadly, the God complex in humanity. Humans, amongst all species, have progressed so much, بس لدرجة من ناحية علم النفس, it's a little bit beyond where we should be, because we've lost touch with reality, and we're now playing God's role of, I want to control everything, I want to make sure everything works out the way I want it planned. But nothing is actually meant to work out the way we want it planned. So once we actually acknowledge that, and we ground ourselves once again, and we really acknowledge that we're not in control of anything, it kind of decreases the level of distress and anxiety we have. And moving to the actual practical part, I think logically, everybody should have a plan B. With everything that is going on, حلو النظريات وحلو نكون هالأدب, but we need to be hands-on, because we're not going to wake up tomorrow in a community or a global community that suddenly acknowledges humanity and equality. Economy is always going to play a role. Financing is always going to be a necessity for putting our kids in school, for accessing healthcare, for being able to sustain lives, to buy produce, to be able to rent households, or to purchase living places. So we need to be realistically grounded. We need to have plan Bs in place. But I think it's also very important to understand that every single crisis, just like it had a beginning, does have an end. And no matter where you look at it, whether you want to look at the existence of humanity, whether you are a believer or a non-believer, humans started and humanity will end. The world started and the world will end. So the crisis began and the crisis will come to an end. So we do need to reach a balance between, yes, planning for tomorrow, understanding that it's completely normal to not, again, we said this last time, it's okay to not feel okay. We need to plan on what needs to be done. We should have a plan B in mind. And we, as you said, we're all waiting to see what will happen. Thus, waiting won't solve the problem. So we need to live our life the way we're doing today, functioning as much as we can at a normal level or a near normal level. And at the same time, having our plan B in place in case things don't work out the way we want, we do know what's going to happen next.
Thank you so much, Dr. Salame. Do you have a question, I believe? Two questions.
Okay, the first one, so what are some tips you could give to someone to help them grieve the life they had once and accept changes? I feel like many of us find it difficult to process our emotions and sit with our thoughts, often resort to distractions. Yes, it's very common. Human nature is to resort to distractions. Like you said, it's very difficult to grieve or accept where somebody was and where somebody is today. But I'm going to answer that with a question myself. What are we actually grieving? We're grieving what societies have conditioned us to grieve. We've been conditioned that living a certain lifestyle, living at a certain financial income, having a household with a certain number of bedrooms, providing our kids with a certain number of gifts in Christmas or a certain kind of birthday or clothing equates to us living appropriately or living a nice lifestyle. But if you go back to what every single holiday actually represented, whether it's Christmas or Easter or Eid al-Adha or Eid al-Fitr, every single holiday used to be about being thankful. I have yet to see today one school where they actually teach kids about, in Christmas, writing letters about thankful for. You find kids coming home today with, this is the letter that I wrote to Santa for what I want. So to answer that question, you don't necessarily have to grieve what you were actually conditioned to believe you've lost. We only grieve what we've lost in terms of humanity, in terms of our belief in ourselves, in terms of your self-confidence. If your income today has decreased by 5% or by 50% or 80%, does that make you less of a human? Does that make you less of somebody to be admired? That only makes you less of a financial asset to the community. But that should not equate to you grieving. But we're conditioned that way because I feel guilty that I can't get for my children the gift that I promised. I heard it a lot from parents. السنة الماضية كنا نزين ونجيب كادوين للكل. السنة I might get one gift for my child. Where's the problem with that? The problem is that our kids expect too much because we allow them to get to that point. So again, revisit the holidays, revisit the underlying ideas from spiritual and religious holidays, whether they're Muslim, whether they're Christian, whether they're Druid, whether they're whatever religion. The underlying message to all religions is about being thankful about where we are and what we have. So let's start by doing that. And when you actually acknowledge that, you will realize that you don't have as much to grieve as you actually think. For the second question, almost every company or institution has at least 5 to 10 individuals who have faced grief or loss. As decision makers, management, and HR, what vital changes should we make to our strategic plans to address this? So I think this is an excellent question. I think it's very important to acknowledge these losses because, again, at the HR institutional level, their focus is on financial income, on produce, on revenue. So if I usually have 20 workers that are working for 8-hour shifts once daily, 5 days a week, and I expect X as an outcome at the end of the week, if I have one person that isn't able to reach their expected outcome, then at the end of the week, obviously the entire outcome is going to be less than expected. So the strategic plan, first of all, needs to visit the anticipated losses that we can have in terms of tangible outcomes. We need to, second of all, see in terms of what's lost, can we tolerate that loss without it negatively impacting us today? And this is related to all fields. We all know that pharmacies make money off medications that are sold. Supermarkets make money off food that is sold. Institutions make money off services that are provided. It's one thing to lose 90% of your income. It's another thing to know that maybe today for 5-6 months, I may be losing of my income. So the question is, can I tolerate that 5% without it having a long-term negative outcome on me? If yes, the only change I need to make to my strategic plan is simply to acknowledge that loss, reorganize my expected outcomes to reflect the new status quo, and then revisit the strategic plan once the situation has resolved, and then return to my previous strategic plan if it's feasible. If the losses are today costing more than what I can tolerate, then akid, I need to look at changing my strategic plan in a greater way. So either I need to look at outsourcing, I need to look at maybe providing services from different departments that today haven't suffered or incurred an individual that has lost somebody and that can still produce or perform at maximum outcome. So it will depend from situation to situation and from institution to institution. But أكيد it's important that we visit our strategic plans and visit them very quickly and very promptly so that we can actually acknowledge the changes that need to be made. So I think with that, we've addressed.
We have a question,
Yes.
Dr. Salame, from Ms. Mona Jabbour. Mona, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, if there's time. No, I was just wondering.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like at this stage, during these circumstances, that there are many losses at the same time. It's not just like one loss, it's many losses. It's both grief, personal, maybe death, maybe material loss. But also, how do we deal with the loss of our identity? It's like we're being defeated as a nation, and it's like feels very humiliating for us, even though we know who we are. But how do we cope with that? Because it's causing like families to be going out of Lebanon, people to lose their roots, young people, they don't want to go back. It's like, how do we cope with this uncertainty that we can't control, that it's like a defeat. It's like we love our country, we love the land, we hate our government, we hate everything that went wrong, we hate the corruption. And then some people are for military action. And then even that, it's causing us to be bombarded. So it's grief on many levels and it's overwhelming. People are losing, their sanity, they're losing, not just they're grieving. Grief is beautiful because you realize you loved something, you lost it, then you say, oh, thank God I had it. But this is defeat, this is humiliation of a nation. And we can't even politically trust our leaders or the leaders outside. It's awful, it's beyond grief. I don't know what to say, but do you think it's only grief? It's much worse than grief, I think. And that's where, grief can be beautiful. It's the loss of something. And then you look back, you say, oh my God, I was so lucky I had it. But then this is so much uncertainty that even the plan B, you're thinking, what if my plan B doesn't work? Then what? You know what I'm saying?
So I agree, Mona. It's a very important point. Again, I agree with a lot of what you said in terms of grieving the losses, in terms of grieving the uncertainty that's coming, in terms of what we are experiencing as a nation today. I disagree with one thing, which is the humiliation, for one reason. Because if countries are ignorant or countries are standing silent, and if people are witness to what's happening and not expressing what's happening, and they're seeing the lives lost, and to me, what is more humiliating is being an individual that has no conscience, قبل ما يكون عنده guilty conscience. So to me, I don't feel humiliated as a Lebanese at all. On the contrary, I'm proud to say that I'm in a country that is being oppressed today, because I would rather be somebody that's a victim that one day can revolt and come back stronger than being somebody that's a victimizer and always being portrayed and perceived throughout my entire life as the perpetrator. Lebanon will be a victim today, it will come back tomorrow. But once, and compare it to a rapist and the victim of an assault. The victim of an assault always feels humiliated and embarrassed in the beginning. But when they acknowledge it wasn't actually their fault, they come back stronger, more resilient, more attached to life. But the rapist will always be a rapist. No matter what they do, the label remains. And so to me, I don't feel humiliated. I feel extremely proud of everything that's happening. I feel extremely proud of the losses that we are incurring. I feel extremely proud of everything that is happening, because with this all, we are still standing strong. We will come back stronger than we were. It will take time, akid. This is not negligence. This is not minimizing. This is reality. No country on the globe has ever been eliminated. No country has ever been wiped off the map. Even if we talk about the occupied territories of Palestine, many maps across the world today refer to it as Israel. But they know in the history that this is a land that was oppressed, that was once called Palestine. It's there in all of the religious books. And so even if it's changed on a map because some countries of power decide to eliminate a name and replace it by another, you find that the world, countries across the world today, are empathetic with Lebanon. They're empathetic with Palestine. Governments may support Israel, but humanity is on the other side. So I would always rather be the oppressed today because I know I will come back stronger.
Salame, I think we have
Thank you.
one more question. Do you mind taking one more question?
لا
Do we
أكيد
have
if
time?
there's a question أكيد.
Thank you. Ghassan, تفضل. Ghassan, you raised your hand.
I think that was raised from before يمكن.
ما بعرف. Anyways, Ghada, you wanna wrap up?
Yes, I want to thank you, Dr. Salame, for another enlightening session. We're looking forward to the next and last session in this series of mental well-being on December 4. So till then, take care everyone and stay safe. Thank you.
Salame. Thank you, Ghada, Manwa,
Thank you,
Gandhi,
Ghada.
everybody.
Thank
Gabby,
you.
thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Salame. Very informative.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And thank you, Alumni Relations.
Thank
Yeah,
you, guys.
thanks.
Abdallah,
Thank you.
Ghada. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you.